Okay, great. In that case, this meeting of the Resiliency Advisory Board is called to order. So now take roll. Board Member Larney,
Present.
Board Member Garrett,
Present.
Board Member Clampett, Board Member Morgan,
I'm here.
Board Member Williams,
Here.
Board Member Yvonne,
Present.
Board Member Meyer.
Present.
Wonderful. Before we move on to the next item, we have a statement to be read by Board Member Morgan.
Yes, thank you. I notified the Resilience Advisory Board on Monday, January 13th, that I would attend today's meeting remotely due to just cause because of a physical injury sustained Saturday, January 11th, that resulted in a fractured wrist and other physical injuries. Pursuant to the Brown Act, I'm disclosing that there are at the present 0 individuals 18 years of age or older present in the room with me. If my husband walks through, you might see him. If he stays in this space, I will update this disclosure if and when it changes during the course of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do need to take a vote to accept the board members' participation virtually. So anyone want to make a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
A second.
All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Right, so board member Morgan is attending remotely. Next, we
Thank you.
will deliver the band acknowledgement. The Resiliency Advisory Board acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of the Kumeyaw, Luiseño, Peño, and Quechua. Today, the Kumeyaw people continue to maintain their political sovereignty and cultural traditions as vital members of the San Diego community. We are honored to share this space with them, and we thank them for their stewardship. So item 3 is adoption or modification of the agenda order. Are there any suggestions for changes? Do we have any announcement from city staff?
Yes, I do have a few announcements. First of all, I'm Kelly Stomp. I'm the Deputy Director of the Environmental Policy and Public Spaces Division of the City Planning Department, and filling in for Chief Resilience Officer Julia Chase today, who's not feeling well. We'll try and fill her shoes in terms of supporting you here today. Couple of items. One, I just wanted to announce for the Coastal Resilience Master Plan, the public review period on the draft plan and the programmatic and environmental impact report is closed. Staff is working to address the feedback received, and we anticipate bringing forward the master plan through the public hearing process, including the Resiliency Advisory Board in the spring of 2025, with exact dates to be determined. Also wanted to take a moment, if I can, to kind of read through the how folks can provide comment on items today, including approval of the minutes, which would be the next agenda item. So I can briefly go through that. There's no one here in person to provide public comments, so I'll skip that section. So virtual, those attending virtually, when the chair introduces an item that you would like to comment on or indicates it's time for a non-agenda public comment, please raise your hand by either tapping the raise your hand button on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, or by dialing *9 on your phone. You'll be taken in the order in which you raised your hand. You may only speak once on a particular item. When the chair indicates it's your turn to speak, click the unmute prompt that will appear on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, or dial *6 on your phone. And that concludes the staff report. Thank you.
Well, do you have any other city staff joining us remotely?
Julia is kind of lurking in the background remotely and listening in. We may be joined a little later by Randy Wild, Policy Advisor at the Mayor's Office, but don't have an exact time frame on his attendance or confirmation. We had another meeting come up today.
Wonderful. Just noting that board member is here as well. 102. All right, next we have item 5, which is the approval of the minutes. Motion.
had the opportunity to read the minutes. And I think they did it, Laura took them, did a good job on these minutes from November.
A second.
All in favor? Opposed? That's our approval.
Wanted to capture if
Yes.
board member, sorry, board member Morgan, if she was voting on the minutes as well, if she did, and if we captured that vote.
Yes,
Okay.
I will so approve. Yes, sorry. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you so much. All right, item 6. Oh, and I agree on the quality of the minutes. Thank you so much, Jersey. Item 6, non-agenda public comment. Do we have any members from the public here who'd like to comment?
Let me double check. I don't see anyone with a raised hand icon. Is there anyone who wishes to provide non-agenda public comment? Don't see any.
And of course, there'll be plenty of opportunity for people to speak on specific items. Item 7, unfinished business. There is none, and greatly appreciate staff pointing out earlier. We should make that clear. Future agendas, so there are no items there from November. So moving on to item 8, we have board action items. The first is election of board officers, and in our bylaws, we have those elections every January. So nomination, I'll go through them one by one. So we have the president, the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary. So nominations are now in order for the office of chair.
Should you wish,
Question?
the new chair nominate Cynthia Harris?
Board member Morgan has her hand raised as well.
Thank you. I just had a question, and that is, would it be possible to put the entire 2024 slate up for renomination, being as they were just elected? If it's possible to make that motion, I would so move.
Okay, all right, thank you.
No objection here.
Second.
All in favor? And anyone opposed? So in that case, nominations are now in order for all 3 positions, chair, vice chair, and secretary.
I thought the sense of what Eric was saying was that we would agree to put the slate that's in place into the new year.
Gotcha.
And if we
Yes.
confirm it, then we don't need to go with another.
Okay,
That was my intention, absolutely.
perfect. Is there a motion to hold the vote?
So moved.
Chase.
Wait, what was the first one?
Yeah.
Cause I had board member Morgan making the motion to put the entire 2024 board up for renomination, and then second from board member Williams, and that passed unanimously.
Okay, I interpret it as, should we go ahead and do it and then hold the election? So
She was just much more efficient, I think. To the
So should I
chicken.
write renomination and re-election? To be, okay.
that's
Yes.
everyone's understanding?
That's,
For clarification, so same people.
yes.
You're stuck.
Just take us up for condolence.
Does the board want to take just one more vote now? You have clarification on the motion, just to make sure. I understand.
So it is currently, the question is, do we approve of having the same people, myself as chair, Eric as vice chair, Jamie as secretary, to continue on for the 2025? We need a motion, that's, okay, yes, all right, no, we already. Everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right,
So wait, sorry, who was the motion and second for that second one? You were the.
Well, I thought it was still being Erica.
Okay, I'll just leave it as one.
Stan motion.
I think it was a
I'm
new
sorry,
vote.
no one- no one-
Motion second.
okay,
No one withdrew their
I'm just gonna
motion,
leave
so
it as
you're
it.
fine.
okay, it was
Okay.
Eric and I believe.
So we're not doing.
It's not.
Easier than-
Right. Okay.
Item 8B, discussion and adoption of the 2025 annual work plan. So those of us who are on the task force to develop the work plan will go over it. I'll start with the rest of the task force. Just want to note that if approved in some form, we would like to send to city staff to review for feasibility. And after we give an overview, I'd like to turn it over to Kelly to give some comments and additional questions from. So, make sure everyone had a chance to take a look at it.
Just quickly too, I am getting some comments that were generally audible, but if we can all speak just a little bit louder. We have the camera microphone working, which is pretty good, but just a little bit louder, and I think everyone will be able to hear.
That's on me, I will work to pretty much. I'll give an overview of the draft work plan. We tried to keep this concise, to the point. The first part is the meeting dates and deliverables. This is based on our current schedule, the third Thursday, which we'll need to confirm, reports to the Environment Committee and specific items that are in the bylaws. For example, our annual report. We also included a strategic issue to each item, for each meeting. In addition to every meeting focusing on the goals, which we'll cover in detail a bit later. Each meeting will also rotate between different issues on resiliency and our biodiversity. And again, these are flexible right now. The only ones that are firm are the ones that are required, like finalizing the work plan, elections, annual report, etc. And it goes into duties and functions, which we're all familiar with. And then this is the key part of the work plan, which are priority goals. And after the discussion, we decided to focus on just 3 goals that would be very doable with the expertise and the capacity we have that align perfectly with our duties and responsibilities. And the last part is accountability, which is key because we do have a feasible but robust agenda for the year ahead. So we want to hold ourselves accountable at every point we possibly can, both individually and as a board. So that's the quick overview, and I'll turn to the task force to go over goals 1, 2, and 4.
That covers what I was gonna say too, I think. So I cheers to Cynthia. Agree with everything she said. And then was I gonna cover goal 1? Is that what we decided?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you to Cynthia and Ian and Stan who put a lot of work into this. Cynthia made it look pretty at the end as well. So priority goal 1 definitely was put in here. I think, well, not definitely, but I believe it was put in here by Cynthia. It's a great idea. And it's just making sure that we all are on the same page about how to organize and set a strong foundation for the Resiliency Advisory Board. So establish a strong foundation. We have objectives and action items is how it's set out in a table here, and how the next 2 priority goals are also set out. And the objectives, they're self-explanatory, I think in a large sense, but the action items relate to objectives, and the objectives are to adopt bylaws, to address vacancies on the board, to establish standing subcommittees, and to build the community's awareness of the Resiliency Advisory Board. I think that for this goal and the other 2 goals, the the draft plan is open to better or new and more detailed action items, or when we move through these goals through the course of the year, we will include and increase the action items. But for this goal, at least those objectives, I think, are a really strong strong component for the first year to make sure that the board gets to where that we want to by the end of December, and can then follow that same pattern over and over again for good deliverables in the coming years. So goal one is, I think, pretty focused on just making sure that we are doing what we need to and addressing all of the components and setting ourselves up for a productive year and then a useful pattern to follow in the coming year.
Stan, you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions on the first one. Given the events of the last week, having a goal about wildfires seems to be, oh yeah, sure. But I want to back up. Again, we set up the ad hoc committee. We had some discussions. In those discussions, like Andrew brought up, looking at wildfire resilience related to the park master plan. I thought that would be an important thing to look at this year. And then as we discussed it with the ad hoc group with Cynthia also participating, we broadened that and said, well, look, given the conditions we're in, the water year is so low in terms of any type of rainfall. We had 2 wet years, I had a dry year, so the vegetation, is really an issue at this point. Given current conditions, why don't we make wildfire resilience in a broader sense, building off Andrew's idea? One of the principal things we work on at the start of this year anyway. And the idea was that we would present that to the full board, get a reaction. Cynthia pointed out, I think, that she thought it was a good thing to put as a work this spring, because it really would involve all board members' expertise, and it's not some topic that we all don't have some experience with. And I think Ian pointed out as well that it is back even in December, it was responsive to the actual conditions the city's facing. So it's responsive, it shows the board, this board is relevant because we're addressing something that we anticipate would be a problem. As it turns out, the events in LA certainly have made this seem less of an, oh boy, here's a great idea. This really is something that we almost have to do. But again, it's a result of our work as an ad hoc committee to develop the objective and the action items, and you can see those are pretty straightforward. And again, this isn't the plan. This is the idea of how do you explain what's in the work plan. And as Andrew was saying, there will follow at some point the implementation of this, and the implementation is addressed a little bit later on in terms of accountability. But there would be a more detailed work plan developed by people who are participating directly in this to actually implement it during the year. So this just gives the concept, an outline of it, so everybody can kind of get a gist of what the intent is. And then if it's approved, it would go forward and into the implementation phase. It seems even more important to me now that we get it just.
Board member Morgan has a question. Should we take questions one board at a time?
Sorry, I think I heard that was directed at me. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the task force for making such a fabulous start at this. I can tell there's been a lot of work and a lot of discussion here, and I really like the way it's been laid out in terms of goals and objectives. I had 2 little timing questions, and maybe the first will get resolved in the conversation, and that had to do with strategic issue for February, because February is, at least the draft I'm looking at, it's covered a couple of different times, and it has TBD, but then it also has a topic area for February. Given that that's our next meeting, I'm assuming that by end of today, we will have resolved what the strategic issue for February is. And it occurred to me that wildfire could be a good topic for the February meeting. So that was thing number one. Thing number two was a question about the quarterly report to Environment Committee as the topic shown for a meeting. Does that suggest, has anyone looked at the timing of the Environment Committee meetings vis-a-vis the dates of our meetings? Does the March 13th report to the Environment Committee happen on March 13th and therefore get prepared in February? Or is the topic of the March date the discussion of the quarterly report to the Environment Committee? That timing wasn't quite clear to me, and it seemed useful because that preparation of the quarterly report takes a strategic topic opportunity off the schedule. So I don't know if any members of the task force have any reactions to those questions, and if not, we can just see where the discussion lands from here. Thank you.
I had a similar question related to the format and timing of the quarterly report. I think, and first, I agree. I think this is a great format and great content. I think keeping it this level of detail is excellent, and I really like it. I think that there might be just a small formatting issue with the table, why the February and March are there, or sorry, the January, February are there. I think the quarterly meetings, I was waiting and holding until Bill 3, because it looks like that's some of the kind of advise the city council type stuff. So I don't know if we want to talk about it all as part of that, or however the chair would like to proceed.
Well, I can respond to part of that. And thank you for everybody. So the folks in here who's talking. This is based off of the legislative calendar for those dates, and I will have a suggestion for staff regarding how frequent those are. So I might want to take note of that input, but that's an excellent point. One to the third, I said one to the third one.
Yeah.
Oh. Let's wait till we finish review and then go to staff comment and then go to public comment, just so we all have a good sense of the.
You said the plan that you guys made is based on the legislative.
Oh, just the reports to the Environment Committee, that's based on the legislative calendar when the Environment Committee is currently scheduled to meet.
Okay.
All right, and for goal 3, pretty self-explanatory, evaluate and advise the mayor and city council on proposed resiliency and biodiversity related policies and plans. So this really gets to a core pillar of the board to advise the city on its approach to resiliency across a wide variety of policy priorities, which also kind of bleeds into goal 2 for this year. So having the city come forward and talk about any past plans or plans that are in the work that might relate to wildfire resilience, but also other things too, like we talked about biodiversity, talk about coastal resilience, given that the city is going through that process right now with a coastal resilience master plan. Climate resilience SD is obviously a big one. So this covers a variety of objectives and action items that pertain to how we want the city to come forward across various departments and present on plans that have come forward and that are in the process. And given that we're a new board and there are a variety of plans that have already gone through prior to the existence of this board, it's important that we have those relevant city departments come forward and present on the work that they've done. And then that gives us an opportunity to weigh in and provide that feedback from the board standpoint to those respective departments along with mayor and city council. And I think that about covers it. Oh, and then as far as presentations go, we want a variety of stakeholders. Obviously, we want the city departments to come forward and talk about the plans, but also we want to make sure that this is inclusive of a wide variety of stakeholders that are impacted or have a strong stake in the city's overall resilience.
Kelly, I believe you have a few points to make from city planning.
Yeah, so city staff, well, Julia and I have been kind of looking through the work program since we've received it. We haven't had a chance to kind of go through in detail and kind of notate everything that we kind of wanted to flag or discuss, that, you know, our priority is making sure that as staff, we're able to provide you guys with the support you need to carry out your work program. But we also do have limited resources in terms of staffing and availability. So providing feedback to you kind of on the work program, on what we believe we have the bandwidth to provide support on over the next over the next year, I think will be important information to share. So we're still kind of going through and taking a look at that. Just some other things too, in terms of perhaps prioritization within the work program. You were mentioning review of other city initiatives. Part of Julia's job is kind of being aware of some of those initiatives that are floating out there in the city that would benefit from Resiliency Advisory Board review, tracking with those departments and bringing those items to you for review. So kind of keeping you updated on what that schedule is, and making sure that within the work program, we have the ability to kind of always be prioritizing those for your review so that they are benefiting from your expertise and your input. And then other things as well, just in terms of making sure we're not, you know, locking you in too much. So for example, identifying strategic issues on a specific meeting, wanting to make sure that there's flexibility language in here. So if you decide you want to move that to a different month, you don't have to like take a vote on it to move it, right? So just kind of even procedural things like that as well, kind of saying these are our goals, but this is also where we want to build in flexibility. And this, you know, isn't necessarily something that is dictating our work plan so strongly that we have to, you know, vote to change things around. So things like that. In terms of the report to the Environment Committee, most boards provide reports, whether those are just kind of written reports or some sort of verbal report out, usually once a year to the council and committee. And that's what I would recommend, to have it kind of be more manageable and I think impactful as well. My suggestion would be to have that September meeting, maybe September, October, be your target for your annual report to the Environment Committee. And I would suggest that timing, because if as part of your report, you're reporting not only on kind of what you've done, but also what you see as resilience priorities for the coming fiscal year, that would be a good point in time in the calendar year to be informing the next year's budget, right? If you're coming too far after that budget is starting to be baked, or even after it's baked, it's kind of not fresh in their minds for potentially informing budget decisions. So I think that September timeframe would potentially be a good timeframe for the committee to target an annual report to the Environment Committee.
Is the city's, sorry,
Go ahead.
Is the city's budget July 1st to June 30?
It is, yes. It feels like it's an all-year process sometimes. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work, and people start to talk about prioritization and so forth. And doing it in September would, you know, obviously the council is like starting to budget discussions now, so that would be a good time frame.
Any other questions? I see we have a public comment. Anne Fishy.
Yes, task or item 2 in the work plan. I can't believe you guys put this together a couple months before this awful, huge disaster. San Diego Union Tribune had an article yesterday, and I've just written a letter to the editor, pointing out that the brush management is only a piece of this whole thing. It has so much more to do with codes and how houses ignite. And I think from the standpoint of resiliency, there's so many of the very complex aligned issues right in this here. It's community, it's buildings, it's where we build, it's how we recreate. Erica's during her hits. So anyway, and I would like to engage. I will send, once I get this letter, one more draft, I will send it to you, Julia, so you can see it or share it with there. really briefly, my background is that I came here in 1991 as the forest supervisor for the Cleveland National Forest. So I managed the and Palomar, Laguna, and Santa Ana Mountains with 300 staff, 25 fire engines, etc. So I know enough about wildfire management to know it to be dangerous. And then I was the Chuck Maynor from CAL FIRE and I were the responsible officials for the Cedar fire. So I'm well aware of that. And then after that, I taught, ran a number of sessions on wildfire risk reduction for professionals. And now I'm working in urban forestry. So I'm I don't want to get too engaged, but it is central to what our life is like here and how we approach the built and the natural environment. So I think it's super absolutely we have people's attention. We probably only have the attention for 6 months until we get a rainy season or something. But I'm in and I'm impressed just how lucky you are to choose this. And I think the statement's good. So thank you.
I don't see any other hands for public comment. Do you, Kelly?
No, did anyone else wish to provide comment on the item related to the work program? Don't see any.
So we'll open up to discussion to the board.
I think that, again, this is a great, program. I think it's a great topic to dig into. I mean, I have a lot of very specific comments and maybe some of those are best saved for, future work and details on these. I think this is a good goal that is a very strong cross-section. Goal number 2 specifically about wildfire cross-section to our work, for sort of the full spectrum of disaster as well as recovery, preparedness, impacts to populations. So I think that's very important. And I'd be interested in serving on a future subcommittee, ad hoc or otherwise, related to that topic to help flesh out additional details. I think one thing that might be a good first start, I will say, is the city of San Diego probably had to do updates to its safety element of its general plan within the last couple of years. And so kind of give an idea of how that was evaluated, and there's certain specific things related to wildfire and evacuations that were required for state laws. And that might be a good place to kind of overview where the city's at and get a baseline.
Which plan was that?
The city's general plan.
The safety of it.
Yes.
Good point.
Any other thoughts? Oh, Erica?
Yeah, someone else had their hand up as well, but I have a couple of questions. One is just what it is the objective of this conversation to give guidance to the task force? Does the task force expect to meet again and incorporate or in some way react to this guidance? That's question number 1. Question number 2 for the task force is, what was your thinking behind the identification of the strategic issue topic for these meetings? I just looking at it would assume that that was sort of informational for the board, not necessarily to result in recommendations in that meeting. Because, for example, on any of these topics that have been identified in the draft, there's a lot to learn. And I'm picking up now on a point that Anne made. The whole topic of wildfires it's there are, in addition to the forestry issues and mitigation issues as they address the forests and also the utilities, there's the whole energy side of it and the built environment side of it, and there are actors in all of those areas. So even one meeting would probably not be sufficient to bring us all up to speed on just a summary of who's doing what in any of those areas. So the third thing then I would pick up on, again from Anne's comments, is I agree completely with the not getting locked in on, or I guess Sarah said this, not getting locked in on topics and dates. Because we might, for example, just wildly think that wildfires is worth more than a strategic issue conversation in one meeting. Learning who is active and in what areas with pieces that have relevance to our mission of resilience and recommendations thereof. There are ways of slicing these issues that go across all the silos of current players. And I, for one, think we would be very prudent to look at these topic areas very broadly with an eye toward what's going on broadly, not in detail, but broad strokes, to consider ourselves, at all informed on any of them. So that's thought. I welcome any response from any of the task force members, but basically just take that for what it's worth and put it in your thinking for your next conversation. Thank you.
Try to provide at least part answer to the first point, which are the ones that Andy I draw on the second one regarding the background on strategic issues. The first one, depending on what the board votes, the task force could go back, make changes based on direction, bring it to city staff for any additional feedback after they have a chance to go through more detail, and then bring it back for ideally a final vote at the February meeting. And then you can ask the strategic issue. I just wanted to clarify, Erica, were you thinking of each strategic issue as related to goal number 2, or is its own standalone? How did you interpret that?
It was a question based on, for example, on March 20th in the draft I'm looking at, it says strategic issue is agriculture. I can't tell whether that's agriculture as opposed to resilience overall, or agriculture as a part of wildfire. And so that's a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sure that the 4 of us don't have a complete answer to that, Erica or Eric. But I think that what our hope was that these 3 priority issues, and the first priority goal being one that we will do as the part of the bureaucratic piece of the meeting, but priority goal 2 and 3 are ones that we want to address every single meeting that we have. But so maybe 50% of the meeting will be a focus on priority goal 2 or 3, whatever the topic or the focus of that meeting is. It'll be focused, 50% of it will be focused on goal 2 or goal 3. Year-long projects that we want to sink our teeth into and deliver something that's useful, which is mildly undefined currently, but would be defined by the working groups for those 2 priority goals. And that we want to work on those year-long at every single meeting. But we also recognize, or I think that we recognize, that we have more than just those 2 issues, even though they're large and complex issues. And so we want to also have a board that meets and talks about issues that are relevant to that particular month, that season, or responding to something that's going on at the city, and that we all have expertise that doesn't align only with those 2 particular goals. So we thought that 25% of the meeting, and whether that's a presentation or an informational update or sharing a bunch of resources with the public out loud at the meeting, 25% of these meetings would also address some other issues that are certainly relevant or related to, but not those 2 priority goals. So we could bring in
those are the strategic issues.
Those are the strategic issues, yeah. Sorry, I don't think I think we probably could improve the description of that. But the hope was that the strategic issue would be smaller, shorter issues, certainly related to these complex issues, but ones that would be certainly flexible. I like Kelly's point about making sure that they're flexible and responding, be able to respond to public comments or topics that the board really wants to make sure are addressed at a certain time. But it would be 25%-ish of the meeting, with a lot of work put in between meetings and at the meetings on those 2 priority goals. Yeah.
Just to add to that too, I mean, there could even be some overlap potentially between a strategic issue and goal 3, where hearing a presentation from a particular city department about an issue that a board member is passionate about, that's not necessarily wildfire resilience, but maybe it's extreme heat once we get to the summer months, hearing from Office of Emergency Services, something, right? Fill in the blank. So there could be some overlap there so that we're not just doing a random presentation for presentation's sake, but actually that could be a dual benefit by also feeding into goal 3. I just want to add that.
Yeah. Can I add one more comment? I like the idea when we discussed it because let's say there's an ad hoc group working on goal 2 and they're really focused on it and they're coming back at each meeting and they're bringing in resources and stuff. That's going to absorb a lot of effort because we're limited, right? 7 board members and we have other things. So limited time, limited staff resources, we're going to be locked into it. But let's not cut off all the other things that these board members are working on or concerned about. So if we're in a meeting, let's have an item on the agenda that says, is there anything else you see that goes outside this work we're doing right now that you're concerned about and want to set up a dialogue or discussion or presentation about? Yeah, I want to talk about whatever the issue is. So that gets put into the meeting planning process. That so-and-so is concerned about this strategic issue, wants to hear more about it, wants to have presentation, wants to have it as a discussion item at the next meeting, whatever that is. And to me, that was really good because it says, okay, we're not going to get too focused on just these 3 things. We're going to keep our eyes open and pay attention to all the other expertise this group has in identifying other issues as they come up. And maybe the extreme heat is a good example of that because logically that would follow some of the things that are going on right now. But it's not the only ones. And so that's the diversity of this group, I think, is valuable. And this was, I thought, Andrew brought this up, it was a great idea to include planning to have that opportunity for each board member to say, look, I got another issue or another concern. I've heard about something. I want to have the board support at least looking at it.
No, just commenting on that, I completely agree. I think it's a great strategy because I think some of it's like a reactive versus proactive topics, right? Like we're reacting to things that are happening, but we don't want to get bogged down with that because we need to be proactive to learn for when something happens in the future. We won't be saying, oh, we don't know anything about that. And yeah, so I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense to be both proactive and reactive. And I think like you were saying before in that, like, it gives different departments an opportunity to meet us and present to us what they've been working on over the years, especially given the fact that most of these plans have been in place before the REB was established. So I think it's great.
Anyone have any other comments or questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
And I think that, well, I think to Erica's, maybe part of it, what Erica was bringing up is that with these priority goals, I think that Stan said there'll be or that we think that there'll be a ad hoc committee working on these goals. There'll be a lot of work in between meetings on those 2 goals. The suggestion that we also have strategic issues would then, I imagine, kind of rotate. So somebody would be in charge of thinking about the agricultural issue. They would invite somebody to speak and share these 2 documents that they think are useful with the board members, but also with the public. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. But I do think for both priority goals and for strategic issues, the one question that we talked about, but I don't know the good answer to it is like, what are we actually delivering? I think for the priority goals, since there'll be an ad hoc group on those, what happens by the end of the year, do we want to write a report or send recommendations or make sure that we hold 10 meetings or whatever would come out of that ad hoc group. But for strategic issues, since it's going to be a little more flexible, a little less input from us, I don't really know. I feel like it would be useful to, we might have to test run this, but what are some things that we want to make sure that we as a board get out of those strategic issues? Not just talking or learning amongst ourselves, although that's critical, but also getting some resources that exist out to the public via the board or via city staff or highlighting an issue that's not working or something. I don't really know. I'm not really sure what the goal or the deliverable of a strategic issue topic would be. But if we're okay with those kind of rotating amongst and somebody choosing, I'll be in charge of March and I'll make sure that it addresses extreme heat or whatever it is. Then the deliverables could kind of change from month to month based on that board members thinking on it.
Yes.
What if it's something a little more fluid where strategic issues can feed into the deliverables around goal 3 and goal 1, particularly building the community's awareness of the RAB? What if it's a little bit more fluid in terms of how we reflect the activities in the annual report? So if you have a presentation on extreme heat, say with the city department, that can feed into goal 3 and that deliverable by providing city recommendations on extreme heat. I don't know if that's clear enough, but just a thought. And how we kind of get something out of something tangible out of a strategic issue.
Some kind of deliverable overhead.
No, I think this, knowing more is just gonna make us more impactful in the, advisory services we give. I mean, just being more well-rounded, so I think I think it makes so much sense. I don't know, yeah, I think it should definitely be learning more.
So I think that's great. I wasn't clear on that when my first read of it, of kind of the difference between the priority and strategic. So I think maybe there's could be a little clearer. One thing that might help going on your point is what's kind of the conclusion, and we hear a presentation on agriculture or extreme heat, and I think we need to ask ourselves the question in real time, what do we want to recommend to city council if we want to recommend, or so that it's just very clear in the minutes and will help us in the long run. We want to make these 3 recommendations. Let's put it in the annual report parking lot so that it'll make our lives easier than then.
And so that we did something with it.
Yeah.
It's good to get information, be knowledgeable about it, get together with it. You turn it into something.
So I'm gonna go over what I have so far based on the discussion. So far, it seems like people have a pretty positive sense of the draft, the way it's structured and the nature of goals. Some small items to change would be to move environment committee report to annual around September, October. More explanation of strategic issues, including rotating among board members, discussing the potential for deliverables, ways we can do that, like make a decision after a presentation and come back as an action item the following month, et cetera. And ensure we have enough flexibility built into it to ensure that we don't lock ourselves into into too many specifics while still being accountable to completing implementation, and then ensuring before we adopt this or finalize it is for city staff to complete a detailed review. Is that not correct so far? Any other discussion, comments, questions?
The only other thing I have noted is it kind of in line with improving the strategic issue definition, I guess. The second thing you said, I believe. Not just defining what it is, but how it will be incorporated. I think board member Meyer said something about like how maybe it's 25% of each meeting. So I think kind of like defining how it fits into each meeting as well as what it means is important as well. Like maybe it's a part of our agenda, I don't know, but just defining how that plays into each one.
Logistically, probably under information items. Okay. That's the point to inform us, correct?
Right, yeah.
And, oh, yes.
Kelly, the flexibility that you talked about, I think is important or got a lot of support. The way that we tried to do that, I think it was Cynthia's idea, was just to put some issues on here and then at the bottom put or at least at one version, we had an asterisk that said, topics likely to change or.
Yeah.
Is there something more we can do or better that we can do to make it?
I think that's like a really good starting point. We're just kind of looking at the language saying like, do we have to do anything else? Do we have to clarify that, like votes aren't required to, move items
Yeah.
around, just things like that, just to try and make it. To your point, we still want you guys to be able to accomplish the objectives, but if the strategic issue topic isn't gonna work for one meeting because someone's not available, we
Right.
wanna be able to just quickly be able to move it without having to convene everybody to vote on that. So things like that, just making sure we've got the clarity and the flexibility on that. One other thing I just wanted to offer or suggest as well, and as you mentioned, we'll be providing more detailed feedback, but just in terms of the strategic issue and kind of the term itself, one thing the city planning department has really tried to focus on over the last couple of years is really kind of re-examining sort of the language we use and shifting to plain language and things that are readily understandable to the public. And so perhaps just using something as simple as resilience topic, as opposed to strategic issue would allow the public to kind of understand what it is and what the point is without necessarily having to look up how it's defined. It's just something to consider.
Any thoughts on that?
Transparency, oh no.
That makes a lot of sense.
If there's no more discussion, oh, India,
No, I'm just.
don't want to jump the gun here. If there's no further discussion, would anyone like to?
Sorry, a little bit more discussion, sorry. Did we put to bed the quarterly report
Yeah.
issue
So,
that was synced up with environment committee meetings? Cynthia?
Yes, the current dates align with the legislative calendar for our committee meeting, but we discussed moving that from quarterly to annual, looking at
Okay.
September, October.
Okay. I think that was how far I was. Alright. I agree with that.
I agree with that, and I don't think we need to talk about now, I guess I'm not clear, like, is that a presentation from this group of where we go to the meeting? Or is it we just send a report or to be determined?
See it all go. Smith, figure slips.
I might have some thoughts. I have seen both written report where there's a presentation by the officers or sometimes, if the group might come to the meeting, be seated with the rest of the public. It could be to be determined later on.
Just based on the calendar here, September 16th, which you have on here, is the environment committee meeting. We don't meet until the 18th. So if we wanted to be ready for a annual report to the environment committee on the 16th, we'd have to do it, finish it by July, because we don't meet in August. Is that?
I am looking at the current legislative calendar. So for September, the Environment Committee meeting is Thursday, the 11th. And this may have been something that shifted with the new appointments very recently. And then October is Thursday, the 16th of October.
That's our meeting.
But these are flexible, so possibly we can update this to make it the second week. Or unrelated thoughts or comments? Can entertain a motion.
To continue working on for the ad hoc committee to keep working on responding to these plus city responses and then come back with a post final in February.
Yes. It could be, it could potentially be a phrase to bring this back with those changes, which I can list off for a final vote.
And
And-
city comment.
Yes.
I know, I have one more process question. I know I've been told this many times, but if Eric has nice specific questions about this, he can send them to you. You can send them to the ad hoc committee, all four of us, or no?
Probably should only send
Only
it
send
to
it to
one.
me. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can get individual comments to Cynthia that made it to the ad hoc committee before we meet. So,
And you can email me individually to remind me to check my email.
okay, thanks.
Sorry, one more kind of process thing with that in mind. I'm gonna have to go dark for a bit in February for parental leave. So if there's gonna be work done between now and the next meeting, I don't know how available I'm gonna be to work on it. So Eric, if you wanted to step in and take my spot, I'd be happy to have that conversation if that's what you're wanting to do. I know you want to get your hands dirty with this stuff, but I just throw it out there as an option so that there's not a person that's just dead weight on the ad hoc committee between now, I can call myself that, between now and our next meeting.
Mr. Chair, I believe I have the authority to designate for switch members.
Sweet, okay. I trust in your leadership, Cynthia. By the way, anything good you're seeing here is all Cynthia.
I don't need typos as I'm looking.
I can just add to the prior question about emailing Cynthia with comments or suggestions. If you could also CC Julia on those, just to keep her on too.
Thanks for that reminder.
Thank you.
Wondering what the heck we're doing. Still waiting. Anyone like to, or if you'd like to make that motion.
Okay, you improved what I had suggested. I'll make a motion that the ad hoc committee, however it's composed, working on the annual plan, continue to bring the information from the board and from the city into their discussion and come back in February with the updated proposed version of the annual work.
Second.
Can I make a comment and maybe a friendly amendment?
Hostile member.
The one of the line items, and I think it was priority item 1 was talking about subcommittees. I know Julia made a comment about the resources for standing subcommittees, so maybe we could ask the city as part of their review to provide more detail about kind of what they think could support. Maybe we could talk about what we think the standing subcommittee should be at the February meeting.
Would that already be covered by receiving city staff comments on the full work plan?
If that's clear to the city, that would.
Yeah, I don't believe standing subcommittees were already addressed, so if you would like us to provide that feedback in addition to this, we're happy to do that.
Motion on the amendment.
Or you can ask him to.
Yes.
Yeah, if you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll
Or-
accept that
thank you.
amendment. Motion.
And then the second was.
Second.
So the question before the board is to amend the main motion to request city staff to provide information on what kind of resources are available in terms of staffing subcommittees versus versus task forces, was that, or just on?
Subcommittees or task forces, I think that we use that interchangeably. If they agree to it, I don't think we need it because I didn't intend to make a substitute motion. So I don't think we need to vote on it. Or I can withdraw it if I'm making things too complicated.
You can withdraw it.
I'll withdraw it.
So that.
But it is heard and will be incorporated into our feedback.
I think it can fairly be incorporated into city staff feedback to everything discussed.
Okay.
All right. So we have a motion and a second, and the question again is for the task force to make the changes to the draft work plan based on this feedback regarding environmental reports and environment committee, updating the description of strategic issues, perhaps changing the names, put that in there, and ensuring we have sufficient flexibility, as well as obtaining detailed review and feedback from city staff.
Just what she said.
Don't ask me to repeat. It's being recorded. All in favor, please. Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand. All right, the motion passes. Thank you all.
Did we just capture if Erica voted yes?
Yes,
Okay.
I saw a hand. All right, so we are on to item 8C. The question is, do we want to go ahead and create those ad hoc task forces now, or do we want to wait until next month when this comes back?
So I would argue, at least on second goal, we would just go ahead and create an ad hoc working group that can start putting more detail in the implementation plan while we get the overall document done. Would be my suggestion.
Detailed implementation plan for each goal.
For goal 2, that's the one I think needs to go a little bit faster than the others necessarily.
Got a motion? Or-
I'll open it up just as a point of discussion.
Yes.
I think that what Stan said makes sense. It seems like, at least at this point, we agree that priority goal 2 is gonna be a goal. And we want people to dive into that issue. The sooner the better. So if it's not putting, I don't think it's putting the cart before the horse, I guess is what I'd say, and so I think it's a good idea.
Any other discussion?
Can I ask a question or get some clarification in terms of, I guess the purpose of the task force as opposed to like, what is the task force trying to achieve that wouldn't just be done at, I guess, or as part of a resiliency board meeting, just to kind of understand what the thought process is.
So my thought about raising the issue is that the work plan, as we presented it, presents a pretty broad, wide set of activities. What I would think would be helpful for the board is to have a subgroup work on fleshing that out in terms of more specificity, assignment of members involved and what their responsibilities are, the metrics on how to evaluate, goal 2 implementation, a lot more detail is contained in just the overall work. And that detail work, I think, does not have to wait for the adoption of the overall plan to proceed. Obviously, we wouldn't want to get too far down the line and not be consistent with the overall. But the timing to me is essential. I have a background in emergency management with FEMA, and what I've seen is when you have a major disaster like LA is having, the political impacts are huge. The world changes in terms of politics and priorities and activities. It just happens on all the way down to the level of government, but particularly at the local level, at the city level. There will be ramifications of this way beyond what we can see at this point. And so the quicker we can move to get ourselves positioned to assist whatever comes out of it, to me is important, timing. Because if you are kind of waiting to see what happens, then really it moves too fast. And government never moves too fast, we know that. But it seems like it's moving too fast if you're trying to participate and affect it. So that's why I think it's important to have this particular goal get going, as soon as possible, given the fact that we want to make sure we have an overall work plan adopted before it gets too far.
So the idea behind an ad hoc subcommittee specific to goal 2 is just to kind of flesh out sort of what these higher level, objectives and action items mean in terms of what the full board will then be working on.
You would draft, in essence, an implementation plan for goal 2 at a greater level of detail than is stated in the overall.
I see that Erica has her hand up and then Jamie as well. Erica? Oh, Mike.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all with anything that Stan's saying, and I particularly appreciate comments about the importance of the goal and how quickly we need to be getting in front of it. I guess my only hesitation about this is whether, just speaking personally, I'd be, able to commit to being on an ad hoc group in advance of hearing the staff's comments about the work plan, which we'll hear, next month. So I'm sort of feeling a little hesitant about going forward until we have the reactions to the draft and the direction we're heading in. That's it.
I was just asking a question about the task forces. There would only be ideally, what, 3 task forces, 1 for each goal? Is that what we're
Yes,
even talking about? Okay.
I believe accountability is also, yes.
Oh, I was just gonna add on to, I think I do share some of Erica's concerns in that sense of like not having a lot of clarity about like what the final work plan will look like in terms of like the types of comments from staff, but I also am very like cognizant of perhaps like current situation that's going on in context of LA wildfire and the importance of this topic right now, but also with the shifting federal administration, how I think that forming a task force like ahead of the final work plan would set a good baseline and starting point for us to like kick off this goal like during the February meeting with all of the previous context and transitions in mind.
So it seems like one option is to create an ad hoc task force just on goal 2 and wait until February to discuss creating the other 2.
Yeah, and just to add, with ad hoc subcommittees, those need to be focused on discrete and kind of finite issue areas. I think with goals 1 and 2, that argument could be made that those are discrete finite issue areas. I think with goal 3, that speaks more to kind of like one of the core functions of the board that will carry on year over year. So whether that is a appropriate candidate for an ad hoc subcommittee, I think I need to do a little bit more thinking on perhaps consultation with the city attorney's office as to whether an ad hoc subcommittee would be appropriate to kind of flesh out sort of that really kind of ongoing core function of advising the mayor and the council.
Thank you. Yes.
In addition to what Stan said that he was thinking about for an ad hoc subcommittee on priority goal 2, I was thinking, I think a little bit to Abel's point, like if we're gonna address this topic in February, we need somebody to contact 3 speakers and get one of them to say yes, and then figure out, what information they want to give us in advance, that kind of stuff. Is that stuff that we would do, or is that something that we expect Julia to do, or you, Kelly?
I think that's part of the more detailed
Yeah.
feedback we have to provide to you in terms of, understanding, what your objectives and expectations are for these work program items and what we have the capacity to support, what we would need to support potentially, and what the capacity is, and provide that feedback to you so that there's that clear understanding and of roles and expectation.
So I generally agree with, I think, what everyone is saying. I think maybe kind of a middle ground is, what if we formed an ad hoc subcommittee that was kind of focused on what do we want to dig into on the February meeting, sort of contacting speakers, getting sort of a start, and then that can run in parallel and with the topic of wildfire and trying to get some speakers and that can run in parallel with the additional feedback from the city before we form any longer term subcommittees.
Also, we can discuss under item 10 if we think that we can nail down a couple ideas for the next meeting. That's an option as well.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
You got me some.
Go ahead and want to proceed, but anyone like to make a motion?
I'd make a motion for forming an ad hoc subcommittee to focus on generally priority item 2 and helping to work on agenda items for item 10 with the understanding we'll still have a roundtable on agenda item 10 from the committee in a few minutes.
So this would, just want to make sure I have the language here to create an ad hoc subcommittee focused on goal number 2 and to develop either we call it a strategic issue or resilience topic for the February meeting.
Yes.
Discussion. So the item has been moved and seconded to create ad hoc task force on goal number 2 of the draft, based on the draft 2025 annual work plan, as well as to to determine the strategic issue / resilience topic for the February meeting. All in favor? Aye. Raise your hand. All opposed? Motion passes.
I'm going to abstain on this.
So item 8B, and this was to continue from the November meeting, whether we wanted to create an ad hoc or standing subcommittee on outreach specifically, because there was quite a bit of interest. I don't know if that would tie in more to goal number 1, or if we want to have a separate body focused entirely on that. So open up to discussion. Go ahead.
Sorry, not discussion on that yet. Did we want to pick members for the ad hoc committee?
Yeah.
Or would you like to pick? I think we could do it either way. I
Absolutely.
would volunteer to be a member on that.
Absolutely. Eric, you're interested. Stan, you expressed interest as well. Anyone else have interest in working on this?
And this was for the ad hoc subcommittee on goal 2.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, who were the members that you identified so far?
Eric, Stan,
I'll volunteer with some hesitation because I'm a little uncertain as to how this fits in overall, but it is a topic that I have some background in.
thank you. Eric, Stan, Erica. And we can have more than 4, but then 3 is fine as well. All right. That is our ad hoc task force. And would you be prepared to report back, given this general update? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erica. Eric and Erica and Stan.
So no vote needed.
Correct.
Yeah.
Item 8D, any discussion on that topic?
I would just offer a thought that outreach is covered to some extent in the bylaws that an earlier ad hoc group did draft. My thinking, as we discussed at that time, was that outreach activities should be targeted specifically to a given objective, or in this case, goal. And in that light, I would suggest that we could again postpone naming this subcommittee, whether it's ad hoc or standing, until after next month's discussion of the work plan. I thought.
I don't think we need to vote on this, since essentially we're taking no action.
I just have a question
Yes.
just regarding, like, I feel like the outreach portion is outlined in goal 1, so I'm wondering. I think this is a question that was already brought up, but would the outreach subcommittee act as the goal 1 subcommittee, or is that just a conversation that we need to have in a later meeting when it's more clear?
Conversation, we can have it now, if people think that's been covered, or very much want to have a separate entity working on outreach. Yes, sir.
I think the next meeting will make it a lot clearer of how we want to proceed with that. So I support having it then, having conversation then.
And I believe we have an update.
Did you have anything you wanted to?
I just introduce myself.
Good luck, guys.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I'm Randy Wild, I'm Senior Policy Advisor in Mayor's Lawyer's Office. Sorry, try to attend these when I can. I had to be a little bit late today, but I could catch most of your conversation. And if there's any questions or feedback from our office, it's like always here for that. Hopefully this isn't too out of order because there's agenda items on it, but I did get your work plan and great job. I think it sets out a really strong structure. Your topics and goals are on point. Very much appreciate the effort you're putting into that. I did also share it with a few of my council colleagues, including the Environment Committee Chair, and just had some feedback around kind of the level of agenda space that is available on those for quarterly presentations. Maybe is a little bit too much, but there's definitely a happy space somewhere of how often to connect and formally report back to that Environment Committee. But definitely happy to have more conversations with my council colleagues about that. Especially our incoming chair to the Environment Committee, Councilmember Gil Rivera, and outgoing Environment Committee Chair, not Council President Lucala. Work very closely with both of those offices and happy to be a liaison or support for you all in whatever capacity is helpful. If you have any kind of questions about current goings on at the city that I may be able to answer or track down and answer for you, happy to take those too.
And when we had discussion, we included as an update to the work plan is to move that reports to Environment Committee to be annual instead of quarterly, aiming tentatively for October.
I'm sure there would be as far as the space, but there's always public comment, there's always opportunity to feed me things that I can provide. Sometimes I can provide kind of just general topics that aren't on the agenda, a few minutes of quick comments before the Environment Committee kicks off, so happy to do that if there's some time to get to the screen.
Any questions for me?
I have not yet read the mayor's state of the city address. Were there any biodiversity highlights that he put into that speech?
Very different state of the city overall in many ways, and part of that being that he delivered it from council chambers in the middle of the day. Kind of the age of austerity being the backdrop, but did start with some comments about what's going on up in LA and our need to continue to support our neighbors and be very vigilant about the dangers here in our local community. There wasn't a lot of discussion about biodiversity specifically, very focused on kind of the four kind of pillars of the mayor's priorities being housing, homelessness, infrastructure, and public safety. Obviously, biodiversity and resilience tied to all of those things in many different ways. And so I don't think he had much time in a 15-20 minute speech to get into details on those, but definitely it's something that obviously is in my workspace. Work close with the mayor.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
And just really quickly, my suggestion for the annual report was that September, October timeframes. My thought was it would not only kind of be generally the end of the year to report out, but also still be a good time frame where if they had recommendations for resilience priorities for the coming fiscal year budget, that would generally be a good time frame. Do you
I
think?
think that's right. They did, so the kind of timeline for budget priority memos from council members has shifted a little bit over the past couple of years. I think the earliest one is now in September, October, but right around that time frame is probably good. That's when people are actually starting to think about the budget after they just got through the July first deadline from the last budget, come back from recess, start thinking about what they want to do for that next year with council committees and with their budget priorities. So that makes sense.
Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate you taking the time. Of course. We don't have any information items under item 9, so moving on to item 10, proposed agenda items for future meeting. We already know that we will be bringing the work plan back as far as resilience topic that would be under the new ad hoc task force. Kelly and Julie, about how far in advance would you to know what the topic is in terms of scheduling presentation?
If we're looking to have some sort of information item presentation in February. It would be coming up pretty quickly here. Let me take a quick look at the calendar. So, Julia, do you mind, do we typically distribute a week, 2 weeks ahead?
We try to distribute a week in advance, and we're the third Thursday of every week. So that would mean, or every month, the 13th, that we would need to have the agenda set at that point. That said, if the board needs my help in scheduling the speaker, we probably do want to coordinate at least a week or two in advance of that to make sure that we can secure that speaker in the time slot needed.
And presumably too, the speaker would need as much notice as possible. So I would really say if there's a speaker that you're thinking of that you would like to try and secure for next month's meeting, certainly before the end of this month, we would want to know who that is and start reaching out to them to try and coordinate that.
But the ad hoc task force be able to meet before then and then email me and Julia the topic.
Yes.
You're the ad hoc chair of the ad hoc task force.
Yes, I believe so. I also, maybe we can talk with the city offline if we're able to reach out to people individually, or if they'd like that all to go through them. I don't have a preference either way, but.
Okay. Any other discussion on the post agenda items for our next meeting?
In the meeting materials, the draft that we've been looking at, it is true that January and February repeat like Rex event, right? So I think Erica had mentioned that earlier. But the second table has January, February in it, but then it's missing the rest until June. But that. The reason I asked her is there are some suggested strategic issues or resiliency topics that are in here that we just kind of made up. Or not made up, they exist, but we just threw them out there because they were ones that we had talked about in November, I guess. And were different enough from the priority goals that we put them on here as strategic issues or resiliency topics. So those ones are on here just as a placeholder, really, placeholder ideas and then placeholders for those dates. They can certainly move around. I think being flexible is an important thing, but if there are, would it work for board members to kind of claim or flexibly claim a month and a topic and then do some work with city staff to try and get a presentation or something going for that month so that that is shared? Or how would we, I mean, for February, we have it covered because it's going to be dealt with by this ad hoc committee for February. But the March issue, for instance, is suggested to be agriculture. That was just kind of thrown out there, but does somebody want to get going thinking about that meeting and that topic? Is that a good way to handle this?
Well, that's why I was asking if these ad hoc committees were only for the goals, because I agree that it would be good to assign the strategic issues ahead of time, so we're not scrambling last minute. I don't know what that would be called, but like just put someone in charge of each strategic issue to just brainstorm. And also kind of like track the issue, I guess, because we can all kind of own the issue. I like the idea.
And make that an action item for our next meeting is after the task force updates the work plan, because we might have some additional organizing. Talk about the best way to do that, and then we could essentially sign up / volunteer.
Voluntold?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think that dealing with it or addressing it in some way would be a good idea.
Any other discussion?
Does the ad hoc committee for the work program have a set date for the next meeting?
No, we'd be able to schedule that with Julia. Thanks, we are on to item 11, adjourned, so this meeting of the Resiliency Advisory Board is adjourned until our next meeting is scheduled for February 20th at 1 p.m.
Thank you, everyone online. We are adjourned.
Take care, Erica.